What's up? You're listening to The Long Game, and I'm your host, David Lee Kim, co-founder of Omniscient Digital. In this episode, we chat with Sahil Patel. Sahil is the CEO of Spiralyze, a leading company specializing in predictive CRO, that's conversion rate optimization, and data-driven landing page optimization. Prior to Spiralyze, Sahil was a CEO and founder of ER Express, which he led for 11 years before its sale in 2021. Throughout his career, Sahil has worked with renowned organizations such as Netflix, the NBA, Lowe's, Harvard University, and Gusto. In this conversation, we talk about how Spiralyze approaches conversion rate optimization specifically for B2B software companies, which have their own unique challenges. We also learn about Sahil's background as a founder CEO and his decision-making process for deciding to sell the business and move on to the next chapter. He really opened up about this part of his life and the thought process and challenges that he was running into when he ultimately made that decision. I think you're going to learn a ton from Sahil. Here's my conversation with Sahil Patel. Sahil, welcome to The Long Game.
David, thank you for having me. Really glad to be here.
Yeah, really excited. Spiralyze is a company that we've admired for a while, and you've been CEO there for, I think, close to 2 years now.
That's right.
Your journey there is pretty interesting. So maybe we can start there. What were the kind of personal and professional milestones that led you to becoming CEO of Spiralyze?
Yeah, it is a little unorthodox. So first, I'm not the founder of Spiralyze. I was actually an early client. I ran a healthcare SaaS business for 11 years. And way back when, this is going back to like 2015, 2016, I was an early client of Spiralyze. And that's why I didn't know what conversion rate optimization was. I guess at some level, I kind of got what A/B testing was, but in a professional setting, certainly had never done it or thought about it as being a valuable ingredient. And it opened my eyes. I could see it really worked, and the Spiralyze product really worked. And then I kept on keeping on. I ran that business for a bunch more years. I sold it in 2021. We had a nice outcome, what I would call a base hit. We sold it to Constellation Software, which is a big vertical software business on a Canadian-based company, and stuck around for a year, typical kind of earn-out type situation. And then when I was thinking about what's my next thing, I really wanted something in Atlanta. And I had stayed in touch with the founder of Spiralyze. As an aside, the way we knew each other is because our older daughters went to school together and we're friends. So like literally the first time I met him was...
Did you find out your daughters went to school together before you became a client, or you found that out after you became...
Yeah, before.
Wow.
The first time we met was in the parking lot. Back then our daughters were little. I mean, now they're teenagers, but it was like the first day of preschool, bringing our 3-year-olds, like getting them out of the car seat. And yeah, that's how we met. So I had stayed in touch with him, and I thought it was really cool. And he had done a great job building the business, and he was looking for a partner to help him take it to the next level. And we had complementary skill sets, some things that I was good at, some things that he was good at, and it's worked out really well.
Maybe you can rewind a little bit back even further. I think I saw your background was in like consulting.
Yeah, right? So that's going way back.
So how did you end up going to found? Yeah.
That's going way back. So out of college, I worked for a company called Booz Allen, which is a big strategy consulting company, and incredible experience, incredible people. And those companies, first of all, they are an incredible training ground because you get a ton of repetitions on the analytical skill set, how to write well, how to run numbers well, how to present to clients well. And that's number one. Number two, they have I think it's not for everyone, but it worked for me, this upper out model where you work your ass off and then they help you get into business school. And these are typically kind of high reputation business schools. And that worked out great for me. I went to HBS for my MBA. I knew by the time I got there that I didn't want to go back and make a career out of consulting. Like it kind of got me from point A to point B and did that really well. And I'm very grateful for it and still in touch with some of the people I worked with there. And that was 20 plus years ago. And after business school, that's when I got into doing software companies.
Got it. Yeah, my girlfriend coincidentally is going to HBS right now, and you're hearing a lot of
congratulations.
I'll tell her thank you. But it seems like the trendy thing going on is this like entrepreneurship through acquisition thing, search funds, where you become the CEO of an existing company. I know your situation's a bit different. I don't think you acquired Spiralyze, but it seems like there's
it wasn't a search fund model.
Yeah, it seems like there's more of folks.
Yeah, it was more organic than that.
It seems like folks are moving from consulting after B school to, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur after B school. So.
Boy, they're in for quite a ride. They're in for quite a ride.
That would be exciting.
I love that more people are rolling the dice and doing something where there's a little bit of risk, and you've got to make sure you're taking like the right amount of risk for your life circumstance. But if more people the search fund, by the way, was a very new thing when I was in business. So I went 2003 to 2005. And the search fund had, there were probably fewer than 100 search funds, like the total N that had been even attempted. Not all of them actually executed a transaction. So my guess is that it's many, many times larger. And I think that's great because the world doesn't really need more bankers and consultants. There's plenty of them. And the ones that are great. And if that's your thing, you should do it. But the world doesn't need more of people making beautiful PowerPoint. If you're out there kind of in the trenches of running a business, doing that hard work, and it is hard work, and most of your life is in the valleys more than it is in the peaks. You should do it. You should try it.
Yeah. So before we jump over to Spiralyze, because I think that's going to be a big part of a conversation, the company you founded that you referred to is called ER Express.
That's right.
So what led you to decide to sell that to Constellation Software?
Yeah, a couple things. And I want to kind of open up here because I think the story, if you look at me on paper, you would be like, whoa, HBS, great school. And by the way, I was fortunate if I went to Emory for my undergrad, also a really great school, incredible experience. Booz Allen. So you see like this kind of pedigree type of resume, and then founded a business and sold a business to Constellation, which was a great company. And it just looks like hit after hit after hit. And the truth is that's not what it was. And ER Express was a great business, great people, great customers, really cool product. But the reality is it kind of, it was not up and to the right. It was like up and down and up and then down a lot and then up a little and then down a lot and then up. And I'll tell you, it was a good outcome. I think it was the best possible outcome for my investors and for the employees and for the customers. And you have to weigh all three of those things. And it was fine for me. I got to take a few coins and put them in the bank, which is great. But first of all, I mean, if you read between those, I'm still working, right? So it wasn't a go to the Caribbean for the next 10 years type of outcome. Like that's obvious. I'll tell you, I'd done it for 10 years. So I started when I was 32. And I'll tell you, the first thing is I had given it everything I could give. I just don't think there was, I wasn't going to like walk away or kind of let it fold, but I just had nothing more to give in terms of energy and vibrancy. I think that's number one. Number two, there's a bunch of things that are, I think, out of your control as a business. And I had finally started to accept them. One of them being, particularly in healthcare, but true for many businesses, if you're a small business and your industry is consolidating, you're in a really tight spot. What are you going to do? And for me, the answer was we needed to be part of a bigger company that could do things that we never were going to be able to do as a small independent business. So those were the kind of the two things. The third piece of calculus was something I would say very personal to me, which was I still had the fire in the belly. I was young enough that I thought I could have one more trip around the plate. And when I looked at my options, the business was actually we were kind of riding some really nice, is it tailwinds or headwinds? Whichever one are good.
Tailwinds.
We were riding some really nice tailwinds. And some of that was timing and some of it was being in the right place at the right time. And our banker said, hey, you could recap the business at a really attractive valuation and still take some chips off the table and be in a better place. Like you'll get better terms and you could probably get more upside. He said, but you're signing up for at least 5 more years of this. And I think you need to ask yourself, do you want 5 more years of this? And I wasn't old, but I wasn't a young dude anymore. I was 42. Like you got to really think about like how many, if you're going to do the CEO thing, you run hard, there's a high price to pay on your family life, your personal life. Where are those trade-offs? Where do you want to spend those next 5 years? Because they're precious. I mean, they're precious in your 30s, but I think when you get in your 40s, you really gotta make that calculus.
Yeah. And so were the options like recap and get a higher valuation, but then have to stay 5 more years?
Yeah.
And then sell as is, but it's a clean cut. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think those were the 2 best options. The third option was to just keep going kind of as is. And 10 years in, I had enough data points to know it would be more of the same, which was fine. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't going to produce a good outcome for the investors. It would be kind of status quo for the employees and team members. So it was I wouldn't say it was an easy decision, but the pros and cons were very clear of each option.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that background because, I mean, there's another world where you could kind of put on a facade like, yeah, it was the best thing that happened. I was extremely happy about it, blah, blah. And you even said pretty transparently, like, hey, I'm still working. I didn't just go off to the Caribbean for like 20 years and retire, right? So I appreciate you sharing that. And it's interesting to hear, we were just talking about this with my other co-founders yesterday, where the most interesting and important decisions in life are the ones where there's no right answer. And for you could have easily chosen to just continue. And it wouldn't have been the wrong answer. The outcome would have been different. But you kind of said, hey, based on my current life circumstances, I have conviction behind this path that I'm just going to move forward with. And who knows if it's the best one, but it's the one that's best for me in this moment. And I appreciate you sharing the thought process behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a saying, there's a saying, you got to make change happen before change happens to you.
I love that.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I learned a ton. I made incredible relationships that I still have to this day. And certainly there's quite a number of people that I worked with at ER Express, customers, investors, but especially the people that worked for me, with me, that are really important to me, and more important than whatever the valuation multiple was on the transaction. But the reality is, for our listeners out there, it was a difficult path. It was a difficult path, and we were lucky that we caught some tailwinds the last 2 years of the business. Now, hey, you got to still execute. You got to do all the hard work. But to give you a sense of kind of my mindset at the time, I was at a place where I was fatigued and beaten down, and I used to have this saying, which, by the way, I don't think is a healthy saying, which is that suffering is part of life. And at the time, I thought it was wise. And I was like, it's kind of this stoicism. Suffering is part of life. If things are bad, you just kind of got to take the shit with the sugar. Now, there's a part of that that's healthy, but there's a part of that that's also not healthy. And I was on a plane to my cousin's wedding. We were going up to DC, and I had just really bad pain in my mouth, and it was getting worse. And I don't mean worse like gradually, like between when the plane left Atlanta and it landed in DC, it was getting markedly worse. And my wife was like, you need to she went from hey, I think you should go see a dentist when we get back, to you need to see someone this weekend, to you need to see someone when we land in DC. And I was like, no. And I just I said, well, suffering is part of life. I'm just going to be fine. Turned out I had an infection in my sinus that was about to go nuclear and could have been really bad. And thankfully, my wife said, you're going to see a dentist right now. Just find someone online, pay cash, whatever you have to do, because this can't possibly be good. And thankfully, I listened to her. And he was like, ooh, this isn't like a cavity gone bad. This is really bad. And I ended up having an outpatient procedure done that hour.
Wow.
And the guy was like, hey, here's what I'm going to do. I'm calling the specialist. You're going to you need to walk down the street. You need to do this right now. And they did it. And, once they knew what it was like 45 minutes and they were done. But he goes, look, you were a few hours away from being in a really bad place. So I share all of this. It's a little kind of an amusing anecdote, but it just goes to show like the headspace of the kind of I don't want to say suffering entrepreneur, but if you get to that place where I'm saying, oh, suffering is part of life, like a little bit of that as a way to kind of say, hey, I got to take some tough medicine and that's fine. It becomes like a big part of where you are. Like, that's a signal that something's really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And in hindsight, I could recognize it. And I like to think I wouldn't get there today. But if I did get there today, I think I would be much quicker to be like, something's not right and something needs to change.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes we just need someone in our life to tell us, you're being stupid.
Yeah.
Go see the doctor. That's my girlfriend from me all the time.
It's really important to have that, and I had a place where the slog and I think the feeling that I had internalized, right? And all of this is happening between this year and this year is I felt that I needed to shoulder that burden for the company. And it just drained the zeal for life, like out of me.
Yeah. It impacts the rest of your life.
And
too.
it was all toil and no joy. And that's just, it's not a good place to live. And there are certainly jobs and careers where people make enormous sacrifices, not just for themselves, but for the greater good. If you're serving your nation in the military, I don't think like the day-to-day fulfillment is like the top priority. Like it's a mission-oriented job, and those things are very unique. But I think for those of us that are working, white collar, gray collar desk jobs in B2B SaaS, if that's where you are, it's a signal that something's not right.
Switching gears a little bit, you kind of shared this whole situation with ER Express and why you decided to move on. You sold it sort of, I'll just say like clean slate,
Yep.
Ready for the next chapter of your life. You end up at Spiralyze. Maybe you can give folks a little bit of an introduction to Spiralyze and kind of speak to what I found really interesting is some of the few agencies I've seen do performance-based pricing. I'd love to hear you kind of speak to the thought process behind that sort of business model.
Happy to do that. Yeah. So Spiralyze, we are a conversion rate optimization company. It's a little unique because it's a tech-enabled service. So we have an agency component that I think to our clients looks and feels like I hired a digital agency. And we also have a SaaS product that we have built, and it comes bundled with the service. And it's the secret sauce. It's the differentiator between us and our competitors. There are 34,000 websites that run A/B tests somewhere on their site. We scrape all of them. So if a company, and I'll just pick one that's a great company that probably many people have heard of, Smartsheet, make a really cool SaaS product.
Mm-hmm.
And they do a ton of incredible A/B testing. And we crawl the Smartsheets of the world to find the tests that they run. Because if you are trying to test on your own, testing, first of all, it just is a cruel game. You have to run a lot of tests to find the win.
Oh, yeah.
And if you are testing by anecdote, which by the way, which is how a lot of people test, they'll Google some ideas, they'll look at a couple websites, they look at their competitor, a couple smart people sit with a whiteboard and go, what if we made the buttons blue? I heard that works. You're just in for a lot of disappointment. You'll find some wins, low-hanging fruit. After you pick the low-hanging fruit, it gets a lot harder. But if you run tests where there's some data that shows the test has worked for other companies, especially multiple companies, so it's been validated, your odds of winning are 3 times higher. By the way, that's not our statistic. It's independently, someone else did the study. And I feel bad because he's really well known and his name is escaping me. So his first name is Jacob. I can't imagine he's listening, but if he is, I just want to tell him I attribute this insight 100% to him, not at all to me or anyone at Spiralyze. So our kind of aha is go out, find the best A/B tests. If one company's run it, it's an interesting idea. If a few companies have run it, okay, maybe there's something there. If we see 10 companies all run the same test and they converge on an answer. That's what we call a proven winner. And those are the tests that we like to run for our clients. Now, we have the service component. So we actually will design, build, and run the test and act as an extension of our client's digital marketing team.
So I read, I think as I was researching the prediction engine, you're scraping these 34,000 websites. You identify the winner of the A/B test. One, how do you know which sites you're running tests? Like, is there like some sort of JavaScript or something on your site that you identify? And how do you know what won?
Yeah. So we're doing three things. One is we're looking for anyone who's doing what's called in-browser, or some people call it client-side testing.
Mm-hmm.
All of that testing is done through JavaScript code injection. So it gives us a kind of a signal that they might be running tests. By the way, you and I, anyone that's listening to this could do this themselves. You can go to any website, look at, right click, view page source, and you can see are any of those scripts running. So that's number one. Number two, we do image capture, so we can actually see the difference between the A test and the B test.
Mm-hmm.
Now, imagine a company and they've got an A version of the test and the B version of the test. By the way, again, anyone at home can do this. Open up a browser in two different windows, like an incognito window and a regular window, and you can see if you see two different versions of the page, it means they're running an A/B test. You can open that window every morning, 20 mornings in a row. Like, oh, split test, split test, split test. And if I were to give a visual to the audience, imagine there's one version of the page has a blue button that says start your free trial, and the other one has a green button that says start your free trial. By the way, that's a terrible test. Don't anyone run it, but it gives everyone a visual. And on the 21st morning, you wake up and you open your browser and there's only one version of the page. It's the blue button. Now you know they picked the blue button. You can impute that it's the winner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one company run one test and they pick the blue button. Does that mean everyone else should go pick blue buttons? No, because you don't know. Why did they pick that? Did they get 3% lift? Did they get 30% lift?
Mm-hmm.
And was it statistically significant? You don't know that. We don't know that. But what we've created is a network of data where we're ingesting thousands of points, and then we're using automation to aid in the collection, and then automation to do the analysis and clustering of what are the common elements. Because that's the part that's really valuable. If you see one company, one test, fine. But if you see it multiple times again, and I'll give an example, a tactical example in a minute, that's when we go, oh, there's something here. And then we want to run that. Those are the tests we run for clients. So, for example, it's a great test. I'm going to go back to Smartsheet, incredible company. And they did this like before anyone else in the market was doing it. They took their 30-day trial. You can sign up to use their product. And they took the form and they cut all the copywriting, all the marketing fluff off the page. And they took just the form and they floated it over a picture of the product. And it sounds weird, but it looks really cool because it makes the audience think. It communicates visually, number one, communicates visually. And number two, it shows what you're about to get if you just fill out this pesky form. And it's really cool because it's engaging our brain at an almost subconscious level, being like, ooh, that looks cool. And I think of it as like if you see a cool car and you kind of put your hands on the tinted windows and you kind of want to, I mean, first of all, you hope the person isn't around, but you kind of want to look in, and the tinting is part of the effect. You can't totally see what's in there. It looks cool. The thing that Smartsheet did was they blurred the picture. So it created this level of enticement. And it turns out, not only did that work for Smartsheet, but it's a repeatable outcome. So it's this really big swing test. We're not changing the button color. We're not changing a few words on the page. We're serving up this dramatically different experience that rewards people who kind of are visually engaged and excited about seeing the product. Because why do you, by the way, the context here, I should say, B2B SaaS. Why do people sign up for a trial or take a sales call for a B2B SaaS product? It's not because they love talking to a BDR. I promise you. It's because they think they're going to see the product and they go, oh, there's something about this thing that looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you're trying to reward. And that test, we've now run it for more than 80 companies, and it has a really high win rate. In fact, 1 out of 2 times it beats the control. And when it beats the control, it gets a 19% lift on average. Now, I don't know about you, but there are not a lot of things you can do to get 20% more leads by making one change on your website.
No. I mean, when I was doing growth at HubSpot, I think 10% of my experiments worked. If you tell me that you have a 50-50 chance of overperforming the control, I'd take that any day.
Yeah.
This is making the performance-based pricing it makes a lot more sense because you have this database of experiments that have been proven to work. And you're like, yeah, surely if we run these top 10 experiments on these websites, there's going to be a high likelihood that it's going to perform well for them. And so you can have that confidence for that type of pricing and business model.
That's exactly right. So what we're running are high predictive power tests where we have the aggregate data on what are the chances of beating the control, and if it wins, credibility adjusted, how much lift should you expect? And what we know, because we've now done this thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times, is that if you run predictive CRO tests where data shows it's already worked for another company, your win rate, actually the rate you just said, about 10% of your tests in your personal experience beat the control. That matches the market at hold.
Mm-hmm.
At Spiralyze, our win rate is 3 times higher, 30%. So what we know is we need to run about 10 tests to get 3 winners. Unlike most of the market, to get 3 winners, they have to run 30 tests.
Yep.
Right. Now let's put aside the execution part of it. Whereas, that means you got to do the design, you got to get the approval, you got to do the copywriting, you got to then write the code. Because by the way, if you're running these big swing tests, these are not the kind of things where you kind of drag and drop a few things. You got to actually write HTML code to make this work.
Yeah.
And you got to make sure it works on mobile and desktop and everything. So that's what you think, David, you put it really well. That's what allows us to do this performance pricing where we can go to our clients and say, hey, we took a look at your site. We have some understanding of where you are today. And we can make you this promise of how much lift you're going to get. And you only pay us if you get that lift. And if you get no lift, you pay us nothing. If you get a little lift, you pay us a little bit. But to earn our fee, we need to get you that big double-digit gain. And for most companies, a double-digit gain in free trials, demo requests, webinar signups, asset downloads has a big impact on their business.
That's really meaningful. So when we talk about B2B SaaS specifically, it seems like one of the barriers that I often hear from folks is we don't have enough traffic. We can't hit statistical significance. We're not ready to invest. How do you speak to those various points? Maybe you mentioned statistical significance in passing previously, so maybe we start there.
Let's start there. What's statistical significance? And I'm going to largely sidestep what a mathematician would want to delve into. Because I'm not one.
We're not going to talk about p-values.
We could talk about p-values and effect sizes and the difference between the confidence level and statistical significance. And people interchange those all the time. They're not the same thing. Here's a useful way to think about statistical significance. If you run an experiment and you run it on a sample of your data, you're trying to make a prediction of how reliable are your conclusions and what are the odds that you are calling it correctly. That's what statistical significance means. And if you have low statistical significance, it means you're not really sure that if you did it again, you would get the same answer. And if you have high statistical significance, then you're really sure. And a great analogy, if you could imagine someone with a bow and arrow, and they release the arrow and it hits the bullseye. They do it again and it hits the bullseye. They do it again and they do it 10 times in a row. Now, at that point, do you need to ask them to do it an 11th time? Certainly, the 11th time, they might get distracted and whoop, it goes way off here, or there's a little change in the air and it goes slightly off target, of course. But the most likely outcome after you do it 10 times in a row is the 11th time, you're going to do it again. So, just plain language, statistical significance thing. How sure are you that you're right? Now, let's take that into the world of conversion rate optimization. Before we even go to B2B SaaS, just conversion rate optimization in general. Most of the work And I think the important work in conversion rate optimization was done in e-commerce, kind of in the last 10 to 15 years by some behemoth teams, Netflix and Booking.com, probably two of the most well-known. By the way, there are others out there that I don't know about that I'm sure are great, and I'm sure I'm leaving someone off the list. But they have the scale, and they've also been willing to talk and write and speak and publish about what they do. And Booking.com and Netflix have done an enormous amount of testing and taking advantage of and really, I think, kind of anchored much of the understanding of CRO, particularly in the e-commerce world. So, like, what you want is tens of thousands of data points and quickly iterate, or even better, run multiple experiments. A green button, a red button, a black button, a gray button, a purple button, all competing, and you pick the one that gets the highest rate. And it's just, I think, instinctively, psychologically, people can get their head around that. It's very visual. That's where I think the roots of, by the way, CRO certainly is a concept in multivariate testing, not anything new. But taking that science and applying it to website behavior, relatively new thing. I would call it last 20 years for the most part. First of all, the internet's not even that old. So it's, the World Wide Web, about 30 years old. Now we take it to B2B, which is, relatively speaking, a recent phenomenon, last, let's call it 5 to 10 years. There are just very few B2B websites that have that kind of traffic. And so kind of the ways, the traditions that are rooted in when you're a Booking.com or don't necessarily translate, number one. Number two, in an e-commerce world where, for example, you're trying to get more people to buy a pair of shoes. If you're Zappos, can you get them in the cart? And once they're in the cart, can you get them to hit purchase? And you're great. Lend itself to really discrete measuring. Like, there's a specific outcome. Did they put the shoes in the cart? How many shoes did they put in? Those kinds of things you can optimize for. And there's this direct line between the action and the dollar impact on your business. So B2B has some meaningful differences between all of those things. One, you don't have that kind of traffic. There's almost no software business that's getting, tens of thousands of unique visitors every day, much less maybe every hour. Number one. Number two, what is the action you're trying to get them to take? If you're a PLG, product-led growth type of company, and you've got some kind of freemium offering, then sure, you have this sign up for the free trial, get them to take some action. But a lot of the other things, sign up for a webinar, click talk to sales. What you're doing is you're creating the sales funnel. So very different type of action. Now we're here, and everyone's scratching their head going, how do I get 99% stat sig? How do I get enough transactions? Because this is what I've learned I need to do.
Run it for 6 months.
Yeah, run it for 6 months. Holy shit. I'm gonna be on my next job. And the experiment's still gonna be running. I'll be on LinkedIn saying, hey, I've got a new job. And I'm gonna ask, hey, how's that experiment turn out? I just, kill me now. Like, no wonder the B2B SaaS world has been much slower to adopt conversion rate optimization. So I share a ton of context there because I think it's important to know kind of how we got here. What is this? What does statistical significance mean from a layperson standpoint? Here's the 3 things we tell our clients to do and that we put into practice. Because the reality is you just can't run an experiment for 6 months. You're probably going to be out of a job. That's what you do, because the most likely outcome for most experiments is that it's inconclusive and it's neutral to the control. It's 2 or 3% better or worse, not meaningfully different. So the first thing you should do is you should take big swing tests, not meek, what some people call meek testing. Meek testing is blue button versus green button. Big swing test is, let's reimagine the page. Now, who I call the purity priests of CRO, are no doubt, if they're listening to this, cringing and thinking Sahil is a complete doofus. And what does he know about CRO? And everyone, don't listen to him.
Are they the ones that would say change one element at a time and isolate?
Yes.
Okay.
And look, if you're Booking.com, you should definitely do that. If you have been doing CRO and you have this in-house capacity to do it, and you've been doing it for 5 years, and you have picked all the low-hanging fruit, and you've done all the optimization, and now you're getting to like these little minute things, you're probably in the place where you can do that. But I would tell you that's not where 99% of B2B SaaS is. Most of B2B SaaS has never run a test of any kind, a true A/B time cohort split test. don't change one thing at a time. You want to take some bold swings, rethink your form, rethink the copywriting, rethink the headline, rethink the background imagery, rethink the social proof. The bigger the change, the bigger the effect size, the quicker you get to statistical significance. That's the first favor you can do the B2B SaaS world. The second thing you can do is kill your losing tests and your neutral tests early. Again, if you're a purity priest, you are cringing right now and you've got 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea and is empirically a huge fallacy. But if you are a B2B SaaS and your options are run a test for 6 months and be out of a job, or take the pragmatic approach, I think most will opt for the pragmatic approach. So here's the outlook. If you find a test that's beating control, you should be very skeptical of it. It's very hard to beat the control. And those are the tests you want to run to a high level of statistical significance. We always advise 95% stat sig. If your test is neutral tests rarely turn themselves around. If you've run a test for, let's call it a week, and it's plus or minus 2 to 3%, next week it's not suddenly going to become plus 10. It's probably going to be plus or minus 3. Kill the test. If your test is losing by a lot, you may want to hang on to it for a few more days just to make sure it's not a fluke. And then you kill the test. And what you do there is you're using your scarce and finite traffic for the tests that move the needle, but you're still applying the statistical rigor before you call something a winner.
On that point too, I remember when we were running experiments at HubSpot, my team would say, hey, it's only 80% statistical significant, like confidence interval, not 95 or 99 or whatever. I'm like, guys, we're not treating cancer.
Yes.
This is not a clinical trial.
80%
is pretty damn good. Let's do it. We're not going to waste another week waiting to see if it goes to 95%.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up because here's the third technique, especially if you're working with kind of in our context. Let's say you call a test wrong. 80% statistical significance, you call the test incorrectly because the chance of doing that goes up at 80% versus, say, 95% stat sig. If that's the only test you run all year, you have a very high risk. Because what if you go wrong? You got to live with it. But if you're running multiple tests, the next test you run is going to beat the false winner. There's a chance it won't, but the next test after that will beat it. So a good analogy is like picking out a shirt. I think this shirt works today. I paired it with a dark blazer. Seems to be looking okay on camera, but maybe it's not. If this is the only shirt I'm going to wear for the rest of the year, there's enormous pressure to get it right. Like it better look good, and God help me if I gain weight or fashions change. I'm screwed. But if I'm going to pick a different shirt tomorrow, the price of being wrong is pretty darn low. I'll pick a different shirt tomorrow and it'll look better. If you run an experiment and you call it wrong at 80% stat sig, in the context of B2B SaaS, we're not saving lives. We're not implementing a drug protocol. We're not curing cancer. We're not developing the COVID vaccine. The next test you run is going to beat the one that you picked.
Yeah, it seems like you're speaking to this idea of loss aversion with some folks. I know when I speak to clients, I'm like, hey, your site is not, I'm not a CRO expert, but I can, as a user, say like, hey, your website's not designed very well. Like, I actually thought this was a link and it's not even a link, but there's an aversion to making the wrong decision of like, okay, what if we change the design and we lose our conversions? But you're speaking to this idea of, well, you're not just going to keep it that way, right? You're going to continue testing and making changes and getting it to a point where it's converting better. So even if maybe you make the wrong decision, that's not, one, it's reversible. You can always switch the code, like revert the code back. But two, it's not the single decision to base your entire career off of. You're going to make multiple decisions and changes here.
Yeah. I think a very fair critique of what I've been outlining, and I think you've been largely concurring with. Here's what I would say if I was critiquing. I'd say, yeah, but guys, what about the learnings? The learnings. If you're only winning 2 out of 3 10 tests at best, what are you getting from the other 7 tests? Well, first of all, they have a really good point. We should not, in my desire to be a little flip and humorous, I think we should always be really and in fact embrace the fact that there's no perfect answers, and opting for a certain approach, in this case, what I call kind of the mercenary approach to A/B testing, it's not without its flaws. And let me be the first to say that and to acknowledge that. Number 2, I would say 2 things. First, if I'm talking to the practitioner audience, people that work in digital marketing, maybe they even wear CRO, conversion rate optimization, as one of their hats. And these people tend to be very good at what they do, very smart. They know a lot, probably know more than I do. To that audience, I would say learnings from the losses, as well as learnings from the winnings, are highly perishable. And they tend to be highly specific to the test you ran. And I'll give you a great example. That test we talked about earlier, showing the product off behind the form. We have run that test recently did this just last quarter for a company. We ran it on their organic free trial page. If you go to their homepage and click start free trial, this is the page you get, and it worked really well because this test tends to really resonate with the high intent audience. It's minimal distraction. Look at something cool. Great. Do the free trial. Everyone was really excited about it. So we then ran the test on their paid landing page, and it grossly underperformed the control. Why? Paid landing pages tend to get low intent traffic, some medium intent traffic, particularly if they are a page that gets a lot of ad traffic from a non-branded search term. Okay, that's typically the lowest type of traffic, lowest intent, because someone Googled a category, for example. Think of someone Googling HubSpot, and they see a HubSpot ad, and they go, that person really wanted HubSpot. They're at least medium intent. They may not be ready to buy, but they know they wanted HubSpot. Let's say someone, Googled CRM software. I know HubSpot does much more than that. Or kind of sales enablement. There's 100 companies out there, and there's low intent that they necessarily really wanted HubSpot. They just wanted the category. That audience, they need context, they need social proof, they need copywriting, they need to see the USPs. That test grossly underperforms there. The reasons why it underperforms are highly contextual to the page you ran it on, the traffic you got, and what was bringing the traffic there. Sure, there's a lesson we can extrapolate, what kind of tests tend to perform with what kinds of traffic. But that learning is super perishable, number 1. Number 2, to our executive audience, I'll just say anyone who's in a leadership position. I put it this way, your board doesn't give a shit about learnings. If you've never been in front of a board, I would tell you, standing up in front and saying, yeah, we did this initiative. It didn't move the needle, but oh boy, we learned a ton.
You're going to be like, where's my money?
Not a lot of kudos there.
And so when you say these learnings are perishable, is that synonymous with not very useful?
No, I wouldn't say not very useful. But I would just say the currency of learnings has a shelf life that's short. Oh, your executive audience doesn't care about it. They don't put a lot of stock in it. And you should write them down. You should learn from them if you can. But I wouldn't say that the learnings are as important in a B2B SaaS world where you have finite traffic and you have time pressures. To me, it's an easy trade-off to kill tests that are neutral or losing early, even if it means I'm shortchanging the quote learnings, because it gives me, I think about a baseball player. You get 3, maybe 4 trips to the plate every game. You want to make the most out of those.
I think this is a good call to action for those B2B SaaS companies who are not trying to do any sort of testing right now. It's probably something for them to try out.
I would 100% agree. And by the way, that's not intended to be an infomercial for Spiralyze. And anyone out there,
I'll make it an information.
If you go to our website, our pricing is on there. You can guess. At our price point, we typically work with companies that have achieved a pretty decent scale before our economics and our price point work for them. That's why we put it there. Try to be really transparent. So that doesn't mean you, if you're in the game, you shouldn't be doing at least some testing. If you've never done any optimization on your website, there's going to be a ton of low-hanging fruit.
So I want to switch gears a little bit as we start wrapping up here. So you founded and exited ER Express. Now you're CEO of Spiralyze. You also have a family, 2 daughters, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
Talk to me about how you manage mental health and the everyday demands and responsibilities of being a family man while also being founder/CEO. Like, that's a lot.
It is a lot. And let me tell you, it being I think executive of any kind, but certainly the CEO, takes a huge toll on your personal life and on your family life. And there's just no way around it. And I think probably one of the things I learned compared to early in my career, where I think I was lying to myself, that I thought I could kind of be the exception. I'd be like, well, I won't really pay that price. Let me tell you, everyone pays that price. There is no way around it. Everyone pays that price. And the sooner you figure that out, the sooner you can get around to how you're going to pay the price in a way that keeps your family happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. There's no formulas there. So that's number one. Number two, what I would say is you need to, the way I would think about it is it's like an athlete. In the off season, we'll take Patrick Mahomes. You better believe maybe he takes a day or two off after the Super Bowl, and then he is back at it. He's working on his fitness. He's working on his technique. He's working on his diet. And to put that in the context of a CEO, you need to treat the kind of the hours. First of all, you need to have an off season. Let's talk about that. If you're working 15, 16 hours out of the day, you don't really get much of an off season. If you're not taking regular vacations, all those things are like the off season. And I think if you ask Patrick Mahomes, hey, could you play football 52 weeks a year? I mean, he's an incredible athlete. And by the way, I'm not a Patrick Mahomes fan because I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan. So let me switch this. I'm going to go to Joe Burrow, who's my guy. If you ask, I don't know why he's talking about Mahomes. I can't stand the guy. Joe Burrow, if you ask Joe Burrow, can you play football 52 weeks a year? I think he would say, my body probably capable of running at that pace for a short amount of time. But that's not how I can be the optimal QB for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think the same thing is true if you're the CEO. Can you run 52 weeks a year? Sure. Should you? You're not going to get the optimal performance. You need to have downtime because that's your off season. You got to rest. You got to recharge. You got to get, sleep. You got to have a life outside of work. I definitely had a time period where I thought if I just didn't do any more activities, no hobbies, and I just poured everything into work, that would somehow get me from this kind of mythical performance level A to performance level, whatever is above that. Because I saw everything as just an intrusion on my chances of success. The opposite was actually true. Total fallacy and very unhealthy place to be. So you got to have that off season to rest, recharge. You got to have some hobbies because that's what makes life worth living. And I think you got to do the things just like Joe Burrow he's working on his nutrition, he's working on his fitness, he's working on his mental game, his game tactics. You got to be doing those things as a CEO. To me, those are kind of three big things. First, you should have a peer group of people who sit in your seat and that you can talk to about the concerns of a CEO. Really good. And I think you should have a mix. People that are kind of in similar companies, size, scale, stage of life cycle. It's also good to have some that are in totally, manufacturing CEO or a company that's big or a company that's been around for 30 years or take it over as a search fund. But you got to have that. There's a bunch of organizations that do it, EO, YPO, that are in a more formal setting. There's some that are more informal. Find the one that works for you. Number two, you need some kind of at least one or two confidant. You need people that you can blow off steam, have a beer with, and just be like, I got to get this off my chest. You can't do that with people that work at your company. It's tempting to do that with your direct reports, your VPs that report to you. You can do a little bit of it, but you should never totally let your guard down because at the end of the day, they work for you. And that can't ever change. Likewise, can't do that with your board. Huge mistake to treat anyone that signs your paycheck like a therapist.
Is this a first-hand experience mistake?
I'm lucky. I'm lucky that when I earlier in my career, I was in a corporate function, and by virtue of that, I had what I would call, kind of tangential exposure to the board, where my boss would be presenting to the board, and occasionally I got to tag along. Great learning experience, and I just learned, what is the posture, what is the relationship up to a board, and the reality is, even if there's friendship, there's rapport. It's a business relationship. It's a work relationship, and don't ever lose sight of that. So yeah, I'm lucky. I never had to kind of have some kind of painful touch the hot pan type of moment when it comes to it. But I know people who have. The third thing is see a licensed therapist. And for all these things, the best time to do it is before you need it, because when you're in a tight spot, your body you're in fight or flight mode. And you just got to make sometimes the best decision if you're lucky, you have some choices, and none of them are really appealing choices. You just take the least bad one. But the better thing to do is work on yourself before you need it. Because then you can do it from a place of calm and a place of learning how to process things before you're in crisis. Because the crisis is going to come. It's going to come in a little c. It's going to come with an uppercase C. It's going to come.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying all of this, because I just watched, I'm not sure if you're a basketball fan, but I watched The Redeem Team on Netflix. It's about the U.S. Olympic basketball team.
The Dream Team.
They had lost.
The Dream Team.
Yeah, they lost multiple Olympics in a row. Then they kind of rebuilt the team. Of course, the big part of the storyline was Kobe Bryant, RIP, rest in peace. But they talk about his whole mindset and everything. And I'm like, you know what? What if all I did was work and I just stopped going to kickboxing in the gym and just stop going out as much for a month or two and just work? And this conversation is telling me, wait, David, that you've done it before. It's a horrible decision to make. Just what makes you think you can go all Kobe on work and only work 15 hours a day and think that'll work out well? So you kind of pulled me back from a mental thought I had just last night.
If I could help a little bit, yeah. If I can help a little bit, that's great. And look, I don't want to say that there are not times where the job will call for intense, way outlier. You just got to be in it to win it, and you're doing those 15, 16-hour days. And I'll tell you, when I was trying to sell when I sold ER Express, I basically had to do the CEO job and I'm selling the business job, and both of those are more than full-time jobs. Tough, and there's no easy out there.
Yeah,
you got to either do it, buck up and do it, or don't do it. But you can't sustain that. Could you do it for a month? I guess, I don't know. Did Kobe do that leading up to the Olympics? Probably. I'm going to go watch it. It sounds awesome. When I get on the stationary bike, I'll queue it up. But it's not sustainable. I think we all know that.
No. So I know we're coming up on time, so I have a couple rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
We can call it afterwards. Sweet. So what's one opinion you have about business or marketing that you think people would disagree with?
Okay, here, I know this is set up to create a hot take. I think that personalization and customization are way, way, way overrated.
Their entire business is built on that, Sahil.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
No, say more.
I think that for many companies, what you really need to do to find customers is show that you're relevant to the problem they have and give them a really clear-cut way that you solve that problem. And almost everything else is out of your hands. And you just got to be at the table so that when they're ready to solve the problem, they know about you.
Yeah, it's not going to make a difference if you're saying, hey, Sahil, on a website or not. If you don't have a value prop, then it doesn't matter.
By the way, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try those things. And it doesn't mean they can't have an incremental effect on your level of success.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a school of thought that has, in the search for the silver bullet, has put a lot resting on this. That when I go to a landing page, it says, hi, Sahil, or it says, we help digital CRO companies solve their expense management problem. Those are good things to try. But I would say there's a lot of other things that you need to do first, what I call the foundations, and then you should add it by all means. I forgot that that's what you do. I didn't tee that up on purpose.
It's a good one.
Good.
Oh, no, we don't do that. But
Feel free to cut that if you want.
No, I know. I mean, I'm referring to, I actually don't know how well they're doing, but companies like, say, Mutiny that talk a lot about personalization. And I've kind of always been on the skeptical side of that. So it's interesting to hear your take on that.
Well, let me tell you, I think Mutiny does it better than anyone else. And I'll tell you, just in the spirit of transparency, they're a huge partner for us. And we have a lot of customers in common. In fact, probably about 30% of our client base is a Mutiny customer. And so they bring us a ton of customers. We bring them a ton of customers. I think they do it better than anyone else. But we always tell our clients, like, you should do it. You should do the personalization. If you want, we can help you do it. You shouldn't do it at the exclusivity of a bunch of other things that will get you there.
Yeah, don't view it as the silver bullet to everything. Yeah,
I mean, I see people all the time. Like, here's a great one. This is like on LinkedIn all the time. Someone say, it's very, I think, fashionable to thumb your nose at like cold outbound email, and you'll see people say, "Hey, the way I want to buy is I want someone to research my life history, and I want them to know what kind of pizza I like. I want them to know my opinion on whether Han shot first and why the prequels were not good and all these things about me. And if you prove that you spend 100 hours getting to know me at a personal level, then I might consider taking a demo from you." But certainly I don't do that opinion. Everyone is. What I would say is that may be the way you would love to interact, just like everyone would love to buy clothing from a handmade tailor with your shirt stitched exactly to fit you. The reality is, how does the mass market buy clothing? Go to Amazon or they go to a store and they I'm a medium. I want a medium shirt that's blue, right? And the guy selling you the shirt doesn't know whether Empire Strikes Back or Star Wars is your favorite. So that's my hot take on personalization.
It's a good analogy. Yeah, the framing helps. All right, so it's next one. What's one impactful piece of advice you've been given?
Yeah. So here's what I'd say. Work somewhere that rewards the things you're good at. And for me, when I was making the decision on what I wanted to do next, I had accumulated at that point, what was it, 15, 16, 17, 18 years in healthcare tech. One of the things I realized was healthcare didn't reward a lot of the things that I'm really good at. First of all, I'm not a clinician. I could say some fancy words, but that was about it. The things that working in digital marketing rewards are very different. That rewards speed, action. That's the opposite of what healthcare rewards. So that certainly informed my decision about kind of where to go. It didn't mean that I knew right away when I was thinking about doing my next thing that Spiralyze was the place to go or that version rate optimization was the field I wanted to be in. But it did give me a sense of what are the kind of characteristics for the environment I wanted to be in. And I think you should think about what gives me fulfillment. I'm going to avoid using the word joy because I think it's very fashionable to say, find a job that you love, enjoy. At the end of the day, it's work. Like once you've been there for, I don't know, a week, month, a year, most jobs, it's work. You wake up, you do a bunch of tedious stuff. If you're lucky, some of your day is fun. Now, I'm lucky. I get to do a job that I really love and brings me a lot of, I think it's the fulfillment, the cerebral fulfillment that says, there's drudgery, there's toil, there's repetition. That's why it's called work. But even when that happens, I genuinely look forward to doing the job. I think that's what fulfillment is.
Yeah.
Because it rewards the things that I like.
It's a great one. All right. What's one book you'd recommend more people read?
Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. Incredible sci-fi book. And I would say this, even if you're not a sci-fi person, it's a really easy read, maybe 150 pages. First of all, it's a great story. Second, you read it, then you go back. This is a story that basically coined a bunch of things like virtual reality glasses, things like having an avatar in your digital kind of existence. And it was published in 1992. Oh. And if you think about what the world was like in 1992, it was very different. The World Wide Web was there, but it was not widely used. And thinking about a world where we put glasses on and have avatars and interact with each other, which is not like mainstream today, but I think we can all know that that's somewhere around the corner. Writing about that in 1992 is just, it's incredible. And it's great fiction. It's a fun read.
Yeah, I just realized I picked up that book. It's like at the top of my bookshelf. Have yet to read it because my queue is quite long. But whenever I hear a recommendation a certain number of times from certain types of people, I'm like, okay, time to move that one up the queue. So
Who else told you about Snow
here's a
Crash?
sign from the world.
I think about it as a niche book. Where else have you heard about it?
I got quite into sci-fi in the last couple of years. And whenever I talk to people about it, they're like, oh, you got to read Snow Crash. I'm like, okay, that's one. And then, oh, you got to read Snow Crash. Okay, that's 2 people, 3 people. And I'm like, okay, now Sahil's talking about it. I'm like, okay, this is probably worth moving up. All right. So last question here is, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Best place to find me. I publish every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7:30. Usually some kind of little nugget about conversion rate optimization and digital marketing. And great place to have a conversation.
Perfect. We'll make sure to link to your profile in the show notes. And Sahil, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.